Lubina, because one of the things, not all agencies are created of the same size, same maturity, have access to the same resources. And so, Lubina, the question is for you, how can smaller teams or teams that don't feel like they have the same level of capacity or resources, or maybe they're just in a different sized or different configured agency, how can those smaller teams still take advantage of some of the opportunities in the exploration of AI that we started talking about today?
So on that note, right, whether you're a large or small agency or organization, if you're a smaller agency, you're working with WATEC. WATEC has stood up a sandbox environment to leverage AI. What we have found at our agency is that our leadership is still risk averse. There was a question about, is my data going to be used for to teach the LLM model? Will our data become available to public? So to address that, we implemented a RAG-based solution. Even though we are looking to implement the Copilot, right now our IT team is reviewing it because that gives access to all sort of data. What we did, the category 1 data or commissions data that was available, that was on public, just like you, we uploaded that data into a RAG model, and then we created the filters around it. So, for example, the filter is that if you do not find the answer in my document, do not fall back on the LLM model to get a creative answer. A great example is that when Matt and I presented to WATEC the literacy workshop that we brought to our executives, along with we brought them a tool which was, again, commission data. All the executives needed to use it. The accessibility of the information on their fingertips, decades worth of data, right? That was a breaking point for us to not just literate our leadership on the technical jargons related to AI, machine learning. Our executives will start seeing those in the RFPs, RFQs. The vendors will start using that terminology. If they are not familiar with that technology, it could mean same thing. It could mean God knows what. So we brought the literacy to our executives, and then we brought them a tool in the same workshop so that they can feel the power of something that was important to them. So organizations that do not have larger budgets, bigger organizations, can start small with the category 1 data. It takes less amount to bring literacy to your executives, to your organizations, and then train your people in how these filters that we can have in place can mitigate some of those risks.
That's great. I like, at this point, we've started dancing around the subject of fear and uncertainty and risk. Bill, earlier in his keynote, talked about we can't just wait it out. And I would tell you, if you're trying to wait out AI, that is probably not a great strategy. And I like that a lot of you have already touched on different ways you've addressed fear, especially in folks who may not have as much experience with technology around leveraging AI. I'd really like to go, if we could, to Cynthia and then James. What are, in your experience, some of the fears that you observed, you heard about around the use of AI? And then what are some ways that you thought about or you've addressed them within your work?
Yeah, so I think internal to the organization, one of the key fears that we hear from our business colleagues across the organization is predominantly centered around AI replacing their jobs, and I know that's not new. I know a lot of sectors are dealing with that. What we've done in the public health department is really focus on human-centered design when we're developing our AI tools, with the realization that AI tools are not autonomous and they need to have that human expertise in the loop from the beginning design phase of the AI tool all the way through to QA, QC of those products. So creating that participatory network with stakeholders within the organization, We formed a public health AI collaborative network, which now has over 22 states that are engaged in developing these guidelines for public health application of AI tools, which has been helpful for that feedback loop where we can introduce new concepts that we're thinking about in Washington State, or our tribal or local public health partners are thinking about. They can have some feedback initially from SMEs in the field, but then how do you carry that through the iteration of users who will be engaging with those AI tools and continue to provide that feedback mechanism to them? I think that goes hand in hand with some of the broader concerns around the trust and bias that is inherent in the development and release of some AI tools. If people can be engaged in the design and development of those tools up front, it's a lot easier for them to continue to support those tools and take ownership of those tools and to message those tools as useful applications and or data insights to their community members. I think from that public-facing perspective as an agency, as best as we can without releasing PII or proprietary information, being transparent about the forms and processes and documentation of the data that was put into those AI outputs, and communicating those effectively so that we're always going to have non-trust partners in the community, but as best as we can be as transparent about the products that we're releasing.
I think when you're looking at fear, it can mean a lot of different things to different people. The first is oftentimes it's around data. So is this AI project going to overshare the data? Is there going to be data leakage? There can be sort of a fear paralysis that oftentimes happens about where do you get started. So I take a little bit different perspective in that I work for WATEC, but you're not in it alone. So we have things like the AI Community of Practice. Lavina chairs our use case subcommittee. I encourage everyone, as a way of getting over that fear, is you're not in it alone. We got this. So, join the AI Community of Practice. We're here to help you and support you. We got great enterprise architects. We can address a lot of the data security concerns and really to get over that fear.
Great, thank you, James. Tomorrow, please.
Yeah, I'll throw another one in there, and it's this idea of like loss of critical thinking and creativity. Because of the gap that AI bridges for you sometimes when you're working, right? So when we had this conversation at work today, let's say you use AI to write an email. Typically, you would encounter some friction in writing that email. That friction represents some kind of development in you about how to get sentences right, how to think through an issue, and that's growth, right? And so there's some critical thinking happening there, and there's some growth happening there. When you collapse that, and you can get to the answer faster, okay, you're more productive, but are you, technical term, are you getting dumber? but it's a big question, and it's something that our leaders bring up. And on one side of the equation, right, some people say, no, that frees you up to do deep work. But then on the other side of the equation, some people say, hey, no, this represents kind of a loss of something that's integral to what it means to work and grow.
I can add to that from a field standpoint, just like James touched on that. The purpose of the AI Use Case Committee is that what we do, we bring in public sector organizations who look like us, and vendors together, those organizations that have gone ahead of us and they have implemented AI in their environment. And so what we bring them to showcase the people and organizations who look like us have gone ahead and implemented AI. How did they do it? What issues that they overcame? Another one is that providing the visibility into some of the tools, some of the features that we have available. The example I was going to touch earlier was that when we were presenting to WATEC, there was a comment that, hey, ask your app how to make a peanut butter jelly sandwich. And I was like, okay, you go in and type it. And the answer that I got, and I loved it, it said, in your commission's conversation, the conversation of food have come up multiple times, but never a recipe for a peanut butter jelly sandwich. And I was like, perfect, because we have told when we were setting up the application, we have turned off the feature that if you do not find the answer in my application, go fall back on an LLM. Had we turned it on, we would have had a recipe. So there are filters available to get around the fear.
I love that. That's one of my favorite QA prompts for a large language model. Ask it to make a recipe for a peanut butter jelly sandwich. That's very good. We're not going to get out of here without talking about the intersection of data and AI. You thought I was joking about talking about open data when I opened here, but we will come back to it. I really want to go to Cynthia if I can. I think you on the panel have the most experience with the intersection of data and AI, specifically from a public health perspective. After that, panel members, I'm going to throw a curveball here. I'm going to ask you all for one piece of advice you would give everyone in the room, and then we'll open it up for questions for the last 10 or so minutes. So again, Cynthia, data and AI when it comes to resilience and specifically public health.
Yeah, so I guess I'll start with garbage in, garbage out. And this came up in the last conversation as well. AI is only as good as the data that we feed into the system. And if we do it wrong, there are consequences to that, whether that's consequences of losing trust of leadership within your organization, losing the buy-in from your experts within the community. From a public health perspective, if we do it wrong and we put the wrong data in, that could cost people lives, that could lead to the wrong distribution of resources to the community that was not most in need. From our perspective, the 3 pillars of things that we look for when we're building data for our AI models and our analytic work is really centered around the timeliness of data. So again, from that public health perspective, we're looking from a near real-time or real-time perspective. How can we uncouple those 438 data systems that collect surveillance data across our organization and have a comprehensive feedback flow of data across those different data entities so that we can provide our leadership, we can provide those communities with the insights and knowledge they need to determine where do those vaccines go, or where do we send naloxone for the largest area or clusters of opioid overdoses within our community. Again, beyond timeliness is really the completeness of data. So, and it's not only completeness, it's the representativeness of that data. So if we're collecting and capturing data, for example, during COVID, we were collecting most of our COVID results from electronic lab reports that come from standalone facilities. But there was a need to evolve and make sure that we had collection of that on facilities that were being stood up in the field, that we were collecting data in schools, that we were collecting data in workplaces, and so we needed to evolve our strategy so that we could have a more complete picture of all the testing that was happening in our community and understand where the most vulnerable populations were, so we could make decisions around where do we send our vaccines, where do we send our limited supply of PPE to nursing homes that are wearing handkerchiefs as opposed to N95s to treat critically ill patients. And lastly, really, I guess I already covered this, the representativeness of the data. There are times that we're collecting data via surveys or form that require a technology-based way of entering that information. We know that leaves a gap in our vulnerable communities and our homeless populations, et cetera. And so how do we develop a more representative sampling of data within our community so that we understand where those impacts are? Now take all that, feed it into an AI model so that we can provide the predictive analytics that leadership is looking for those data insights and outputs from the organization. And I guess I want to tie this all back to some comments that were made previously. I hope that AI is not making us dumber. I hope that it's making us more efficient, and that this entire process requires experts in the field to continue to relay back to our team those various details around the data that help us provide better inputs and insights to the communities to inform that. But I realize that takes a lot of organizational change management to get there and bringing people along in that process.
Thank you. And again, that's why we're appreciative that Cynthia is on the panel. So again, last question. For those of you in the audience, please have your questions ready, Jack Potter. So we'll go, I'm gonna start on this side, and I'll go kind of in order. One thing that you want the audience to take away from what they can do leaving this room or to kind of further drive through the intersection of AI and resilience.
So in preparation for this last night, I took my raw DNA file and uploaded it to, let's just call it an AI tool to experiment with just how it would interpret that text file. And so one piece of advice is if you're a leader, if you're in IT, you gotta experiment. You can't put it's just, we've all been around long. We've seen a lot of change, and like a lot of us are in this industry because, man, like we love being in this space. And so you gotta experiment, but I kept bumping up against these limits because of how long the text file was. And so based on what I would ask it, it would struggle. And so it was a reminder that there are limitations. And so there is a conservatism that we need to bring to what we do. There's caution. And so you have to balance out experimentation with limits.
And that's why tomorrow's here. I never thought of taking my DNA file and playing with the language model.
Yeah, they're going to clone me. So.
From my perspective, the biggest benefit came from when we provided the literacy to our executives and handed them, in that same workshop, handed them a tool that they could ask questions decades back. They were able to ask some of the questions and they were so surprised. They were like, how does it know that? Because I wrote that report. And I was like, okay. So in that chat, there is the link to that. Now there is a demand at the top level and they are directing their teams to come talk to us. So that has been the most beneficial from our perspective. Though our agency is an agency of scientists, PhDs, who work on biological and conservation of our beautiful state, they can bring in 80 terabytes of data. So talking to them about AI, there is skepticism there because data and analytics, they have been doing data analysis when it was a term, when it was cool. They have been doing it for centuries, when it was only pen and paper that they used to do analysis on. So talking to them and partnering with them about efficiencies is another story for another time. But I think the biggest benefit came from when we provided the literacy to the executives and handed them a tool that they could leverage.
That's great, thank you. Cynthia.
Yeah, I think the biggest benefit in our endeavor of bringing on AI as an organization is really a lot of the entrenched practices that our organization is still very much in we're starting to have conversations. We're starting to break down those silos across our organization. We're starting to have meaningful governance discussions. We're building that out in systems that will sustain that governance structure for a longer period of time. And we're seeing that buy-in come in from the analysts and EPIs across the department and really buying into that system and buying into the tools and the excitement of, hey, I'll sign up for a UAT. I want my POC or my proof of concept to be part of this. It's just something that I don't know. I've been in public health for about 2 decades now. I haven't seen as much enthusiasm from that public health community to move towards a new technology, very entrenched in that pen and paper mechanism for a long time. So it's exciting to see that transition slowly happen with the workforce. And then, yeah, the slow gains of hearing the governor on governor press briefings talk about predictive models that were developed using AI tools at the Department of Health and understanding those models and being able to speak to the impacts to the community. Definitely had a lot of sentiment for our group seeing the recognition and understanding of data from that perspective.
Thank you, Cynthia. And James.
I love is AI making us dumber? No, it's not. And my take is it's not. It's sort of like when spell check came out. Like, do I need to learn to spell anymore? You really don't, because you have spell check there. So I think instead, well, I'm just saying, if you think about it, AI is changing what is intelligence. AI is here. It's not a fad, a shiny object that's going to go away. It's going to be as prevalent, or is as prevalent as cloud computing and data services. So I don't think AI was making you dumber. I think AI is going to take over some aspects of your job or aspects of your life, and that you can focus your intelligence on different things, and that's going to differentiate you. I think kind of playing off of the POC and experimentation, the one takeaway, and you've heard it, given the governor's directives, the budget crunch that we're in, is really identifying metrics. So for all these projects, I've heard a lot of people experimenting with chatbots and everything else, and they're like, well, we kind of got cut. And I'm like, well, did it meet the outputs and the objectives of that project? And they're like, we don't know, we just got cut. So I encourage you, if you are experimenting, if you are piloting, if you are doing a POC, which I encourage all of you to do, please define your metrics as the start of the project. We're there to help you. Participate in the community of practice. Go through the AI project, measuring it before, during the project, and after to really see if it's worthwhile for your agency. And again, at WATEC, we're here to help you. So wherever you are in your journey, please reach out and we can be of support.
Before we move to questions, can I please have a round of applause for our very grateful. All right, we've got about 6 minutes for questions. So, I think first come, first serve. Mr. Potter.
Do I get my quote on this?
Yeah.
I
I would say you don't need one, but yeah.
Hello. I found in the last year or so, as I've been researching some of this surface area, AI, LLMs, MLs, computer vision, etc. They can be like an alphabet soup of acronyms, and they don't mean the same thing. So I'm doing data management at Department of Fish and Wildlife. I actually work for Rubina. So I probably shouldn't ask the question, but I'll do it anyway. Do you have any tips or tricks on how we can decouple and destigmatize the different portions of, because some people may have a distaste for generative AI because it's ubiquitous and like clickbait everywhere, like don't use that image in my slideshow, that kind of thing. And focus on where we show real value and real engagement opportunities. If you're going to use generative AI, or using it in a use case, or are we just making pictures with it and wasting time? Because I think that being able to demonstrate that is important. And are any tips on how to articulate that better, not only to our executives but also to our business partners?
First come, first serve. Go ahead, Sarah.
I don't know that I have a whole lot of tips and tricks that aren't things that I already shared about how do you bring people along. When generative AI became mainstream media, a lot of us were saying, well, ML, machine learning, and large language modeling has been around since the 60s, but it's all being coupled together underneath this broad umbrella of AI is here and it's going to change the world. And so we were fortunate enough that we were already entrenched in a lot of the ML and large language modeling as an organization working with academic partners to do some of that broader predictive modeling. But during the COVID pandemic, we had to do a lot of education at the governor's office level and at the leadership level on explaining the various types of AI that we're using. What is a machine learning model? What is a large language model? Generative AI came in a little bit later into those conversations, but it's really creating that space. I would say I think the community of practice that's been shared here is a good opportunity to get people engaged in really understanding the different facets of AI. We within the Department of Health have worked through various CDC channels on community of practices to share that knowledge across our team. And then people who are interested, how do you get them engaged? How do you get them tools to start learning on their own? We invested in a tool called Data Camp, which is a great tool for data scientists who want to have anywhere from the basics to how do you code in Python and have more specific on-the-job skills development activities. So I think there's a tier of things that could be applied to try to help organizations come along and understand those differences.
Great. We have time for one more question. So,
Yes.
Straight back.
I didn't want to do the last question, but.
Oh, that's okay.
Go for it.
Hi, I work for WashDOT. I'm in the office of, John?
Oh, I don't think so.
I
We
talk
can hear you.
loud.
We can hear you.
I'm in the Office of Equity and Civil Rights, so I can really appreciate the public health perspective, because that's where I'm coming from. And I wanted to talk about trust and community engagement, especially when it relates to marginalized communities and vulnerable populations. You mentioned a lot about transparency, and you have to be like, open and letting these communities who've had experienced real harm, like how, a big thing is the data justice and making sure that, people's information is not used against them. So do you have any real life examples of working with, like, let's say a troubled group on how you went through that transparency process? Because like an organization like WashDOT, we have to do that community engagement to make sure that the engineers are doing what they do on the freeways and stuff like that. And then the last thing, if you have some time, is the digital accessibility. I'm on this new project. Did you have any experience using AI for digital accessibility for those groups of populations that maybe have low vision or no vision or cognitive diversity? Because AI is assuming that you have those abilities to do whatever it's supposed to do.
Cindy, you have 60 seconds to
Sorry.
answer that very complex question.
I'm sorry.
Join the community of practice. Hold on.
I'll take the first one. If anybody else on the panel has an answer to the digital, feel free. But from a Department of Health perspective, there were several different consultation groups that were stood up at the beginning of COVID, and the realization that we could do better and we should be doing better when it comes to engaging with our community. There's a separate group within our agency called the Office of Strategic Partnership, and they worked alongside our equity team to really do what was the formation of a community engagement forum, where we weren't just making assumptions for those communities. We were having community health workers engaging with those community members and getting their feedback and then tying that back into our processes and systems. On the tribal side, we were actually called to the floor for tribal consultation early on in the pandemic, and that was helpful in getting us to a place where we now recognize tribal sovereignty as an organization. We've established tribal data sharing agreements, which was not an easy lift. That took us about 2.5 years to get a tribal data sharing agreement in place, an agreement across our 29 federated tribes in partnership with AIHC to take ownership that on our system side of things. There are things that we need to do to assure that the data that we're collecting on tribal members are made accessible to those tribal communities, but going a step further, that data shouldn't be accessible by our staff. And so what can we do moving forward, realizing retrospective, there's not a whole lot that we can do to change the past, but moving forward prospectively, there are things that we can do to assure that future systems that we set up are taking into consideration that sovereignty and addressing those concerns of the community members.
Perfect way to end the panel. Once again, please, a round of applause for